Trey Lance may not be fine, depending on who you ask in terms of his future. Steve Mariucci was on the Rich Eisen Show and talked about Trey Lance and the idea of the Niners maybe dealing him.
This is my guess. I don't know for sure, but I think if Trey Lance plays well in the preseason, okay, because I think they know what they have in Sam Darnold. Smart guy, experienced guy. He went 4-2 with the Panthers last year. I mean, he's been around a little bit with your Jets, and and he'd be a heck of a backup, and he's a good mentor kind of guy. Doesn't rock the boat. If Trey Lance can show well in the preseason, I think there were a lot of teams that liked him when he came out in the draft and had him graded as a first-round guy. And so I think teams will say, hey, look at him. He's back. He's healthy, and would be willing to give up a nice draft pick or two to go get him. Because, there's such a premium on having a healthy quarterback and a guy that's capable. Maybe somebody gets hurt early in the season before October, trade deadline. I think that might be they might be able to get some draft picks back.
What do you think about that, Styles? He's talking about many teams having him as a first-round grade and, high character guy and somebody that many teams could possibly covet. The trade deadline is Halloween, October 31st. So between now and then, what do you make of the prospects of the Niners possibly trading Trey Lance?
Well, first of all, I think it's funny because I think it was just last week where Rich Eisen was throwing out the idea of cutting Trey Lance for Brandon Allen. So funny how stock, you talk about buying stock in Styles. It's funny how the stock changes so quickly. But back to what Mariucci said, I do think that there is a possibility that this happens, as we've talked about. Sam Darnold, for everything that he can do and can't do, he is one of the better backups. Now, being a better backup still means you're a backup at this point, but he still has the arm talent. He would be playing with a better roster than he's ever faced before, ever had before. So you would like that Sam Darnold would be able to control that offense and not mess it up, right? You're not asking him to be Superman. So I think that there is a chance Trey Lance, and for everything he's tried to do with this organization, I've been on #FreeTrey. I think he deserves another opportunity or just a fresh start, if you will, the same way Jimmy Garoppolo talked about a fresh start, the same way Derek Carr talked about a fresh start. Obviously, they were with their organizations much longer, but I think that it could just work out. I mean, Jordan Love essentially got a fresh start because Aaron Rodgers left, right? If Aaron Rodgers decided not to leave, they'd probably be thinking, all right, let's try to move Jordan Love. And that's also a pretty decent comparison because I don't know, during that time when they were talking about moving Jordan Love, obviously he wasn't picked as high as Trey Lance, but in terms of value, how teams saw Jordan Love, because he was maybe even more of a question mark than Trey Lance because Trey Lance was a higher prospect. So you run into these situations and it's nobody's fault. We'll be having the same conversation. The only difference with Zach Wilson is that we don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to play that long, right? We don't know how much longer Aaron Rodgers is going to play. But all these guys, once you're with a team for whatever amount of time, it's eventually time. All right, do we want to just see what we can get for him? Or are we just going to hold him just in case? And there's people on the YouTube chat, people on the Xfinity Mobile text line still talking about the draft capital you gave up to get him. That's a sunk cost at this point. I don't think the Niners are still thinking about that. I think they're just thinking about what they can get back. I mean, Dibs, if you know what I mean, we just put in for the fantasy football, right? Yeah. For the station. In a couple months, would I like to win? Yes. But in a couple months, am I still going to be upset if I don't win and the money I put in? No, because it's gone. Right. So I'm not going to sit there and think about it. I'm going to work really hard and try to win the league, but I'm not going to dwell on it. And I don't think the Niners are going to dwell on the fact that it hasn't worked out with Trey Lance the way they would have liked. They're just going to move forward.
Well, they'll move forward in one of two ways, and I do agree with you from that standpoint. They will either move forward believing that Trey Lance can be a quarterback or their quarterback, or they're going to move forward with the idea that they want to get something back for Trey Lance, because the picks that they sent to move up to get Trey Lance, that is a sunk cost, but that doesn't mean you won't try to recoup something on the back end. And ideally, you would recoup wins. You would keep Trey Lance. You would play Trey Lance. He would win games, and it would make the investment that you made all the more worthwhile. Now, you have Brock Purdy, who's replaced him, so you don't have that as priority number one. Priority number one for the Niners is to have Brock Purdy be the quarterback and win the Super Bowl. If Brock Purdy can't, because of injury or ineffectiveness, be the quarterback to win games and take you where you want to go, then you get to that second step, which is either we believe in Trey Lance, he'll be the backup, and he'll get the shot, or we believe more in Sam Darnold, and he'll get the shot and hopefully lead us to where we want to go. And if that's the case, I think the best route would be to trade Trey Lance. And Steve Mariucci made a good point about the trade deadline in October. Between now and then, you might have quarterbacks get hurt. And we already had the hypothetical trade about Tampa Bay, and they've got Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield. Could Trey Lance be a better upside play for Tampa this year than either one of those guys? I think the answer to that is yes, but what would the price be? And would Tampa be willing to make that bold of a move? They just drafted Kyle Trask a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and now I'm thinking, Dibs, there's been all this conversation about how Brock Purdy is going to play, how Trey Lance is going to play, how they have played so far. And one thing that doesn't get mentioned enough is Brock Purdy against the Cowboys. Brock Purdy did not play great against the Cowboys, but the Niners won because the Niners are better than the Cowboys, and the Niners are more trustworthy than the Cowboys. And Kyle Shanahan is a very good coach. But my question is, what if that Brock Purdy starts the year? What if that Brock Purdy goes the first couple games, meaning that they win, right? But it's not the Brock Purdy of old. It's not bad, but it's not the Brock Purdy of old. And you find yourself into a situation, life is but a bitter circle, having the same conversations you had when it was Jimmy G, right? I mean, it's possible. We all assume, and the question mark of, was what we saw last year for majority of the season, was that really good Brock Purdy? Was that mediocre Brock Purdy? Is that the Brock Purdy we can expect? Can he turn it up a notch? What if the end of the season and the end of the playoffs with Brock Purdy and the Cowboys where, okay, yeah, he was fine. What if that's Brock Purdy again, 30 days removed now? That's how long we have. He had that UCL surgery. Then what? Because then you're waiting for that Brock to show up. What if that Brock doesn't show up? Then is it just a QB battle next year with Brock and Trey? Or does it get to a point where whenever they face an elite QB, Brock doesn't win, and now you start having questions? I think the biggest thing here is that the Niners have moving Trey is still a gamble. And you can believe that Brock Purdy is QB1. I do believe that Brock Purdy is QB1.
Right.
But you can still believe that moving Trey is a gamble because 6 games is just small sample size. That's it. Doesn't matter who it is. It's a small sample size. And then on top of that, he's not just coming back healthy. He's coming back off a major injury.
Right.
So if I'm the Niners, I'm in a conundrum because Trey's stock is rising. If you move him now, you're really going in on Brock. And look, it is still a small sample size. And I know somebody's going to find that disrespectful because Brock is going to be the franchise QB for the next 20 years.
Could be. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know that.
We don't know. Nobody knows.
The sample size is bigger with Brock Purdy than it is for Trey Lance. And you look at Brock, and he started 6 games or 5 games in the regular season. He came on early in that Miami game. He almost played the whole game. And then he started 3 playoff games. So you've got 8 starts and 9 games really to look at. 8 games and a dollop of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So that sample is bigger than what you have from Trey Lance. And you mentioned Jordan Love. It's bigger than what you have from Jordan Love, who's only started 1 game for Green Bay. So in terms of making that leap and figuring out, which quarterback you want to consider as your franchise guy, you look at more than just the game tape you have. Kyle Shanahan's looked at practice tape and knowing the players better than any of us possibly know them, they make those judgments. Steve Mariucci on the Rich Eisen Show talked about the Niners being really high on Trey Lance.
They were so high on him last year, Rich, I couldn't believe it. He was going to be the next Steve Young. And it's been the injuries that gotten him. It's his ankle he got hurt in week 2. And so the poor kid has had the injury bug. And if he stays healthy, he's big enough, strong enough, athletic, smart enough, all of it. It's just he's been hurt. And it's that simple. But you got to be available, like Joe Thomas, 10,000 snaps in a row.
Right.
You got to be available, right? And you can be Joe Montana, but if you miss If you miss most of the time, you're not Joe Montana. And so, anyway, that's his deal. And you're going to see him. They're not going to play Brock Purdy, I don't think, in the preseason. So you'll see Trey Lance quite a bit in the preseason with Sam Darnold.
Not playing him at all in the preseason. I disagree with that, Alan. I think that you play him in preseason week 2 and then shut him down for game 3. What do you think they're going to do?
Giving Brock Purdy Aaron Rodgers treatment in the preseason is insanity. It's insanity. And if you do that, you're telling me right now, in my opinion, you're telling me you're afraid of what you're seeing from C.J. Stroud getting cracked. We're going to hold off on him seeing those big boys that are trying to take his head off even in the preseason. We don't want to deal with that. We're just going to take it to the regular season because it would be ridiculous now. Now we're getting ridiculous. All right. And I like Brock Purdy. I was on the 30 for 30, Purdy for Purdy. Brock is hot. I was on all of that, but that's a little crazy now. Come on, man. Really? We're treating Brock like he's Tom Brady, like he's Aaron Rodgers. You don't need to play in preseason.
Especially when you're trying to shake off the rust from Brock Purdy. I don't think that you're going to give him that treatment. I'm looking at the Patriots from last night as they got beaten by the Houston Texans 20-9 in the preseason. Mac Jones didn't play. Now, that doesn't mean that Mac Jones is not going to play at all in the preseason. Bailey Zappi, by the way, a nifty 12 for 14 in the loss. But I do believe that Brock Purdy will be out there, and he needs to be out there. He doesn't need to play preseason game 2 and 3.
No.
I'd like to see him get maybe 3 series in preseason game number 2, maybe a full quarter, depending on what he can go through and where you feel comfortable because of what you were talking about, the rust and the velocity. And the only way for him to really shake that off is through actual game reps. Joint practice is as close to a preseason game as you can get, and the preseason games aren't quite regular season games, but it's tackle football, so he needs to get into that setting, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we know Kyle Shanahan likes joint practices because of the structure and things like that, but there's no way even a preseason game not being a regular season game, then there's no way that joint practices can compare to that in terms of the speed and in terms of the physicality. Now, there was a report, I believe, not too long ago, Dibs, that talked about how Brock Purdy, he was injured, I believe, when he went to Seattle. He had the rib issue, right? So Brock Purdy has been banged up a little bit too. We know if you watch The Quarterback on Netflix, all these guys are banged up. We get all that, but there is something to be said there because how much do you want to put your QB out there before you have to? But I think it would be a bad look if Brock Purdy doesn't play at all, because now you get into the conversation of if things don't go well in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Well, we were just working it back. So now you're sacrificing real games. Now you're sacrificing your real record with guys that are going out there, putting their blood, sweat, and tears on the line. And you have a guy warming up, Dibs, warming up during the regular season. That's wild to me. That's wild.
Agreed, but you do have to balance that against the threat of injury, because you mentioned C.J. Stroud last night taking hits and he's your rookie phenom, and you're hoping for the best for him to be your franchise QB. Yet he's out there getting lit up a little bit in August. And so you've got Brock Purdy, and already we had to hold our collective breath when his elbow got hit in 49er practice.
That's
not even joint practice. We had to hold our breath. I think it was Cleveland Ferrell who came in and hit the arm, and we all got a big gasp, a collective gasp, because our quarterback dared to get hit at all. So you do want him to face a little bit of actual tackle football before he gets in there for the first game against Pittsburgh.
You have to. And Dibs, I'm sitting there. We did the show. I'm grabbing my dinner. I sit down, and maybe it's because when you don't see football for a long time, it looks, you get a reminder, oh yeah, this is football, because I'm sitting down about to eat my dinner, fire up the highlights, and boom, C.J. Stroud just getting knocked up. I'm like, wow, man. Whoa. I mean, this is a big, this is real deal. So I get you don't want to have him out there. He doesn't need to be out there as much as C.J. Stroud or how much Bryce Young is going to be out there. I understand that, but I do think, to your point, you need at least 2 series. I mean, 2 series, you cannot have this guy in bubble wrap, because eventually you got to get in the pool and you got to learn how to swim. That's just what it is.
It's Alan Stiles in for Mark Willard today. Willard and Dibs on a Friday. Let's go to the phones. Leroy is in Oakland. He wants to talk about the quarterback situation. What's up, Leroy? You are on 95.7 The Game.
Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, enjoying the show. I'm sitting here listening, and I have a statement, and I have a question. So the question is, I thought a couple of months ago, I was like, man, this quarterback situation is so screwed up to me. I mean, going back to, I'm a lifelong 49er fan, going back to Jimmy Garoppolo and everything that has transpired since then. And I was to the point, I was like, man, we might as well just see what Sam Darnold can do. And my question is, what if Sam Darnold starts to outplay Purdy and Lance in preseason? Will Shanahan admit it? And what will he do? That's the question. And then the statement is, yesterday we were talking about, does Shanahan strike fear, in the players, this healthy fear? And I was like, I think he does, but it's the wrong way. And here's what I mean. I think Shanahan is a guy a high character guy. He wants all these character guys in there that'll say, hey, yes, sir, to everything that he says. And I'm to the belief that, you got to have those Draymond Green guys that are a little difficult. So now when these NFC championship games come, there's this toughness. And I just think he's got too many yes, sir guys. And I want to know what you guys thought about that as well. He strikes a fear in him. Yeah, but I heard yesterday, what's Purdy going to say when he says, hey, you need to start doing this? Purdy's going to go, yes, sir. What is the other guys that they're going to go, yes, sir? And so, I need some guys that, man, they're going to push back a little bit and have a little more nastiness and oomph. And so that's all I wanted to say, guys. Have a great
Thank you, Leroy. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend. I think that Shanahan's approach and his style is fine as long as they keep winning.
Yeah.
If you get to a spot where you're losing games and players become unhappy or disgruntled, and I think about Brandon Ayuk and last year in camp where he was in the doghouse and Ayuk didn't work hard enough and Shanahan handled it in his own way, and then Ayuk got the message and came out and had a fantastic year. So I think that different coaches will reach their players in different ways. Not everybody has to be an in-your-face, barking, intimidating presence.
Yeah, I guess my question to the question would be, are you asking players to disagree with Kyle Shanahan, to push back? Because then you get into the conversation of disrespect, and he is the coach. So I'm not really quite sure if it's about, if Kyle Shanahan says, you guys need to be doing this, if Fred Warner or somebody would say, no, we don't. So I guess I'm not really sure what you would be pushing back on Kyle Shanahan about.
And because is that really good for the team? Right,
exactly, because that would be seen as messing up the vibes, I guess, and the cohesion of the team. And we know it's supposed to be a close unit of guys, because going to Brock Purdy, hey, you need to be doing more of this. I would love to hear Kyle Shanahan say that. I feel like we haven't seen that enough. We haven't heard that enough, and maybe it's because of the rust. He's getting back. So I don't think it's necessarily a pushback thing. And to Leroy's point quickly about if Sam Darnold starts playing better than Trey Lance or Brock Purdy, I believe that's the thing about Kyle Shanahan. If that were the case, I mean, that's the good thing. You already aren't playing your most expensive quarterback. So that's
Trey Lance.
Yes, if your second most expensive quarterback starts playing better than your starter, who is your least expensive quarterback, run him out. You running him out there. I think it would maybe be a little awkward, but you running him out there. I just don't think there's anything Sam Darnold could do until about week 5, week 6. I mean, Brock Purdy would have to play so bad without injury to get yanked. It feels like it's impossible.
It would have to be a bad preseason, and then that would have to spill over into bad regular season games for Kyle Shanahan to make that move. And today, he threw a pick. He threw 2 more in 7-on-7s. Also, Darnold and Trey Lance threw picks in the practice today as well. So the quarterback play was bad across the board in terms of what Kyle Shanahan wants. So it was not just Brock Purdy was bad and the other guys were good. The quarterback play was bad. So you take that and you chalk it up, and then you look at Brock Purdy. If in the first preseason game that he plays, which will be preseason game number 2 or number 3, if he looks bad then and he looks bad in practice, and he doesn't seem to be back to being the same Brock that he was last year, he still gets to start in week 1. I don't think that Brock can be beat out by Trey or Sam in any way, shape, or form over the next 30 days and lose that job.
No, it's impossible. It's impossible to me. I don't know if you remember when Ray J made those glasses and he said, "Hey, I just made these glasses. You can't break them." It's impossible. They cannot break.
That's Brandy's brother, right?
Yeah, they ended up
Kim
breaking
Kardashian's star maker.
Sure, yes. Also known as
Was that not how Kim Kardashian was injected into the public eye?
It was.
Thank you.
It was.
You've been making fun of me all week for my lack of knowledge.
No, you were right on this one.
I just dropped a couple of dimes. Now, for the bit, I would have said Khloe Kardashian, but I wanted to reestablish my credibility.
But I didn't need you to then tell me what the bit would have been. You know what I mean?
I didn't need you to question my knowledge, though, Alan. This is starting to turn on us again, and I'm here for it.